Welcome back to the Monday MLB Central. We are presented by Essilor. JP Morosi is north of the border, living the life. Game 7 is tonight. Good morning to you. You are all smiles. Your question, your interview with Trey Savage was unbelievable. You also asked him about his favorite Game 7 memory. This is what we all do this for. What's the sense north of the border? Good morning.
Well, Lauren, certainly the people of Toronto are hoping that their favorite Game 7 memory is about to happen tonight, because it's just the second Game 7 in Toronto Blue Jays franchise history. How about that? And it's, of course, a reality because of what we saw and experienced last night at Rogers Center. We've been treated to some amazing environments, Lauren. I'm not sure I've seen a better one than what I heard and saw last night at Rogers Center. Of course, they had seen 2 defeats for the home team in games 1 and 2, but everything changed in Seattle. They lose game 5, and you just felt the urgency. Now, this is the second ever Game 7 in Blue Jays history. The previous one, I was texting this morning with the man who was on the call for NBC that day, Bob Costas, with Tony Kubek. That was a bases-loaded triple from Jim Sundberg. Of course, the Royals were able to win that one, Game 7. They go on to win the World Series that year in '85. And so this will be just the second Game 7 in Jays history, the first in the history of the Seattle Mariners. And Lauren, you think about all the parallels. They're expansion cousins back in 1977, and now they're meeting tonight in Toronto with a World Series berth on the line. And I get goosebumps just talking about it, even though it's only 10:50 a.m. Eastern time right now as I'm saying it, and we're still a ways away from the first pitch. And Julio Rodriguez, to be honest, last night, I want to give credit to the Mariners for how quickly they turned the page, because he said, hey, I'm so excited to be playing in the first ever Game 7 in Mariner franchise history. And as he was saying it, listen, it was the baseball gods. It was meant to be. And I think he's right. This series has been so closely matched. As much as the Blue Jays are disappointed that they lost that Game 5 with a chance to win it in Seattle, they bounced back in a huge way in Game 6. John Schneider manages the bullpen very, very well. Eugenio Suarez had his moments, of course, in Game 5. He made an error in Game 6. That's how you know you're in a great series, that the heroes have their tough moments too, and now it's all coming to the forefront in a Game 7, the likes of which this building, Rogers Center, has never seen. Again, you saw that the previous Game 7 that the Blue Jays played was outdoors, exhibition stadium. 44 degrees Fahrenheit was the game time temperature. You saw, by the way, the Canadian Football League grid of the Toronto Argonauts out there because the seasons are overlapping. No such case tonight. Beautiful ballpark, Rogers Center, Game 7. We can't wait.
Wow, you're firing me up. The strategy, JP, of these games is what I love the most. The pressure on the managers to execute the pitching plan to perfection. It will be Shane Bieber to start the game. And what does that look like in terms of innings, pitch count? What will you be looking for?
Lauren, I think in many ways, Shane Bieber is the ideal man to have on the mound for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I was actually chatting with some people in the Toronto clubhouse yesterday, and the general sense was they've got the right guy on the mound. Now, they've got a lot of good choices here in terms of other starting pitchers that are part of this rotation. But I go back to that Game 3 and how much pressure there was on Bieber to try to flip that series around. And he did it. There was, of course, the early power that we saw from the Seattle Mariners, but Bieber settled in so nicely. You look at what he was able to do. He had 7 swings and misses on his slider alone. He threw 5 pitches well, slider, four-seamer, changeup, knuckle curve, and cutter. All were working well for Bieber. And honestly, Lauren, in that game, he outperformed his counterpart, George Kirby, who I know we'll talk about here in a moment. But one other note about the manager, John Schneider, and the way in which this game and this series is all coming together. Of course, John was criticized a bit for the Game 5 bullpen issues there. I actually had less of an issue with it than many people did. And here's my favorite John Schneider-related note as we approach Game 7 tonight. John Schneider grew up in New Jersey. His favorite player growing up, Don Mattingly. Don Mattingly is now the bench coach of the Toronto Blue Jays. Mattingly signed his first professional contract in 1979. If the Jays win the game tonight, John Schneider will have have his favorite player as a kid, Don Mattingly, in the World Series for the first time in Donnie Baseball's career. His first time as a player, manager, coach. He's been to the LCS before as a coach and a manager. Don Mattingly never in the World Series yet. That could change tonight.
I just got goosebumps. Wow, what a story. A full circle moment for both of them. And both bullpens, JP, will be ready at first sign of trouble. Are we talking, ask D-Row who should be available. He says everybody. Are we talking Gausman, Castillo, Wu? I guess it's easier to ask who won't be available, right?
Right, Lauren. And by the way, just D-Row knows that we'll be asking him these very same questions before the gold medal game in March. Who's in your bullpen, D-Row? These are the best decisions to have to make. Let's talk about the Seattle Mariners first. I'll say this, Lauren. Yesterday, when we saw Matt Brash come into that game in a minus game, down 3 runs, eyebrow raised for me, because now Brash, you see it there, he's pitched in 4 games. I was a little worried about it from a Mariner perspective that now the best hitters on Toronto's roster got an extra look at Brash. I didn't love it, but the reason why it can make some sense is that last name on your screen. If Brian Wu is available, then it starts to make sense, because then you consider how perhaps the pitching plan for the Mariners looks like a lot of George Kirby, maybe through 5 innings, maybe even more than that, but 5 innings, I think, at minimum. Then Brian Wu, then Andres Jimenez, who has been or Andres Munoz, who has been so good. Munoz has been unbelievable for this team in the postseason. So I think Munoz is the guy that we see pitch in the latter 2 innings. Now, with the Blue Jays, here are their options. I consider this situation to be an option potentially to see even Max Scherzer in the 5th or the 6th inning. We could see Chris Bassett. Look at Bassett. He's only pitched in 1 game, and he was pretty good there in game 2.
There's a lot to digest.
Yes, a lot to digest. The questions came, I thought, of course, Brendan Little struggled a bit there in the way that he pitched in game 5. I think Mason Fluharty could be an option. You saw he pitched in all 4 of the first 4 games of this series. I think Fluharty's an option. Bassett's an option. Scherzer as well. Gausman said last night, he said, I'm available too. Jeff Hoffman, I said, hey, Jeff, do you think after throwing 35 pitches in game 6, you might have a few more left? He said, I'll be ready. Lauren, they're all ready. And I think it's basically, unless you started game 6, okay? Trey Savage, he's earned a night off in game 7, but I think basically everybody else from the Jays is available. I think the same thing is true for the Mariners. Lauren, it's going to be an epic game. I think all the ingredients, we've seen a lot of drama in this series, but we haven't seen that classic 1-run game in the end. We're due for one tonight.
Ooh, a little foreshadowing.
I want to have one of those back and forth. I want to have 5 lead changes, and I want my lineup card to be just a complete
You got
scribble.
a suit on at 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's how you know. JP Morosi.
I'll be sitting right there by the time 8 o'clock rolls around, Lauren. I cannot wait. This city, this country. I was walking to breakfast. All the Blue Jays hats are already out in downtown Toronto at 8 a.m.
JP Morosi on the Inside Corner, live from Toronto. Thank you so much for the time. As always, Robert, take it away.